Excellent. So hi, and thank you everyone for coming along tonight. I'm Rory Waterman, a member of the English and Creative Writing academic staff at Nottingham Trent University and the convener of Nottingham Creative Writing Hub at NTU. And this, of course, is a Nottingham Creative Writing Hub event. Tonight's event is focused around monologues. So we're going to hear monologues from three of my colleague Anthony Cropper's students on the MA Creative Writing at NTU. That's Jade Curley, Lesley Walker, and Teya Dancer. I know them all personally and they're brilliant. And then we'll have a performance from the well-known and supremely talented hip-hop artist Cappo, real name Paul Adey, who is a Midlands4Cities-funded critical and creative writing PhD candidate at NTU, who also graduated from our BA and MA creative writing programs. Then we'll have the screenwriter and, dare I say, occasional actor William Ivory. William, Billy, is a close friend of our courses. In fact, he's guest lectured on the MA creative writing many times. He's been a visiting professor on that course as well, and he's visiting next week. And he also holds an honorary doctorate from NTU. Then finally, there will be a Q&A. The event, as I say, is hosted by Nottingham Creative Writing Hub, which is a central place, a hub, no less, for creative writing at Nottingham Trent University, hosted by the Department of English, Philosophy and Communications. NTU is home to dynamic and long-established undergraduate and postgraduate courses in creative writing, BA, MA and PhD, with an exciting, thriving, diverse community of writers. You can see some of those today. If you go to our website, and I'll put a link in the chat shortly, you'll find links to our courses, member profiles, a blog, and information about forthcoming events, among other things. Today's chair is the excellent Zach Omitowoju, a BA Media Production student at NTU, and the current research assistant with the Hub, who's on placement with the humanities-wide undergraduate module Humanities at Work. He's been brilliant, and this event is essentially his doing. I'll welcome him in a minute, but first a little bit of housekeeping for everyone. Those of you in the audience, which is a very packed audience, even if you don't feel like you're jostling for room, you'll be able to see and hear the readers and performers throughout the evening, but audience members can't be seen or heard. So if you're messily eating nachos in your pajamas, we won't know, so don't worry about it. At the top right of your screen, there's a button where you can toggle between seeing all of us if you want to, or just seeing the current speaker. We do very warmly invite all of you in the audience to ask questions and to make comments. And there's a chat function for comments. You'll see that at the bottom if you hover the cursor over the screen. And there's a Q&A button that you should see down at the bottom as well, where you can submit questions for any of our speakers. Now, you can submit these questions at any point throughout the evening, so please do ask away, and we'll come to those at the end. We might not have time to get to all of the questions, but we will try. And now, with great pleasure, I'll pass to Zach, who will get the evening underway. Over to you, Zach.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming. At the end of tonight's event, there will be a Q&A, so if you have any questions, please feel free to click on the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen and type your question, whether it's for William or one of our other speakers. You can type in your questions at any time and we'll come to them at the end. Our first readers are three students of Anthony Cropper's on the MA Creative Writing, and they're going to read monologues. First, Jade Curley.
Thanks, Zach, and thank you for to the Hub for inviting me to read my work. So my monologue then, I wish I could say that I had some kind of muse or a literary epiphany, but the object, the focus within my monologue was literally just in front of me at the time of writing. However, the piece does still explore the themes of ambition and expectation. So here is my monologue, Future Plans. I never really wanted to be a ukulele. Mum and Dad wanted so much for me. Keep it in the family, they'd say. But just because you've got strings doesn't mean you want to be played. I considered other options. Maybe I could be a guitar instead, Similar to a ukulele, so would have kept the parents happy, and I could have gone on tour with Queen or Bon Jovi. In the 80s, it was all rock and pop and synth and roll. And apart from Cyndi Lauper, no one played ukuleles in the 80s. Or a spoon. I considered being a spoon, a big one at that, closer to a ladle, but I could easily have been a spoon, starting off serving chocolate slop to 9-year-olds, then soup du jour at the Ritz. Christmas 89, the Beano Annual. On the cover, Dennis the Menace had painted Nasher as a cavalier, and I saw it and I knew. I wanted to be a picture frame. I was already made of wood. I could already sit still for hours waiting for attention. I went to night school to train as a frame, but I said I had a job at the chip shop. Had evening lectures with all kinds of wooden folk. Sandra the door, Martine the curtain pole, became best mates with Richard, a floorboard. All of us dreaming to be juxtaposed with smatters of paint and thick lines. Dad found out when he went to get a chippy tea. Saw me and Richard on our way home. Where'd you know that plank? I tried to explain he was a friend of a friend, lied. Didn't really know him that well, lied. He grabbed me by the neck and said, if you defy the family line, I will throw you on the fire for burning. I often think about Richard at the National Gallery holding Landscape with Poplars by Cézanne. I'm down the side of the settee next to a pile of last year's Good Housekeeping, strings like winter twigs. Thank you.
Thank you, Jade. Next is Lesley Walker.
Hi. Thanks, Zach. I wrote this monologue in recognition of so many of us that feel we're not perfect enough to find love. Insecurities run deep. I realise now that all the misconceptions I had when I was young have in no way stopped me loving and being loved. I just hope other people don't take as long to realise this as me. And this is my monologue. It arrived yesterday while John was out, thank God. I'd seen it on Facebook and hoped it'd work. What do they say? No fool like an old fool. I should have known you can't compress flesh that much. When I opened the package, from China of course, it looked like a tube of black elastic, but only about a foot wide. I ask you, who has a body that small? And if they do, why would they need the miracle fat compressor anyway? Does China have fat people? If they do, they couldn't get into the miracle fat compressor. It took ages just trying to step into it and pull it up to my hips. All the fat simply got pushed up. I tried to push my boobs into it. It was impossible. And when I finally managed to get it off, I had tram lines all over me. I've tried diets and slimming clubs, but I just keep eating. So what can I do? John doesn't say anything, but he seemed colder lately, more distant. And if I lose him, if he goes, I die without him. I know I will. That sounds like John now. I'll hide this thing away. You won't tell him, will you? Thank you.
Thank you, Lesley.
Thanks.
And now, Teya Dancer.
Thank you. I wrote this for NTU's Creative Anthology last year. And what is it about? Well, I'll let you decide. Ingratia cantantes, gratitude. Linden trees and sunny streets. Happy people and simple dreams. The smell of sea and watermelons. His bright green eyes and loving smile. The winter wind with all its might. His cold white face, a final sight. I open my eyes. The morning sun is stabbing my face through the lace and wet whiteness of my window before which I stand. Its rectangular shape is printed on the black carpet with temporary yellow ink that vanishes at any moment as the day grows capricious and moody. But who can blame the sun? It too must get sick and tired of looking at the same thing all the time. The same earth when no one ever makes up their mind. The people never change. You can't blame the sun for taking it personally when people buy heavy blinds and thick curtains, black shades and tacky parasols to hide away from it. And then, when sad and embarrassed, it disappears into winter, they seek it. They call it back. Frantically, they tap their watches in discontent and ask where the hell it's gone and how come it's taken it so long to come back on demand. It must be difficult to be the only light in a world full of darkness. Blinking through the sunshine, I try to see outside. Nothing's changed as far as I can tell, save for a few flower buds that no longer go by that same name. They have blossomed into white, starlight flowers, blooming proudly in the sun. Show-offs, I think, and smile their arrogance. For them, everything has changed. They're not restrained by common sense and are incapable of prejudice, surely because they don't watch the news or read the paper. They can kiss each passing bee, can talk with all the birds, and offer them their hospitality if they should stop by for a visit. They can whisper secrets to the wind, and no one judges them for being honest. In the next life, I should very much enjoy to be like them. I give the flowers one last smile before the yellow frame dissolves into the carpet. In the darkness of the room, I look around and my eyes rest on his face. He smiles at me, forever framed in black, from a picture taken more than 10 years ago when he still knew how to smile. My best friend, my rock, my father, when we were both ourselves. Suddenly I feel compelled by a desire, a need, no, a yearning to talk to him again. I walk over to my little desk, sleeping cozily in the darkest corner of the room. My notepad is there, ready, patiently awaiting my arrival. Her best friend and soulmate gently rests on top of her, eager for my hand to pick him up and reunite him with her pages. Writing is a teamwork, a partnership between mind, hand, paper, and ink. And even when the latter two have been replaced by fingers and a keyboard, still, everything needs to be in sync. A collaboration between those two participants is vital, especially when one decides to write something as peculiar as a letter to her deceased father. Dear father, it's a funny world you left behind. It's been over 3 years since you so suddenly departed, and each day ever since I have missed you more than words can say. The fact we never got to say goodbye had added extra weight to getting on with my life, but the circumstances meant that we were some 4,000 kilometers away from each other when it happened. In my dreams, I often see this scene. We're in the garden of the old house. It's a warm summer's morning and the sun is shining through the crowns of the linden trees that grew on each side of the street. The patterns of the leaves dance all around us as we sit on those horrible white chairs that you kept for years, facing each other in silence at first. I love you, I say through tears. You smile. The shadow of the trees now dance on your face. I love you too. I jump out of the chair and straight into your embrace. It feels so real. I think that this is the closest thing I have to a closure, although I know it's never going to be quite enough. And I will keep waking up morning after morning, tasting this bittersweet emotion in my breath. But then again, what if we did say our goodbyes before you passed? Would I have missed you any less? I assure you here the answer is no. And what is it you always said? Life is a chain of hellos and goodbyes. I still quote you here and there, whenever those words of yours are appropriate, and they're appropriate a lot. You see, I have always believed in these words and that we will meet again one day, get another chance in a different life where we can be a father and a daughter once again, and maybe I can make things right. But now, as I'm writing this letter to you, I'm possessed by a doubt. a sense of chilling fear. How could we ever say hello again if we never said goodbye? Thank you.
Thank you, Teya. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
And now I will be introducing Paul Adey. Paul is a current PhD student at Nottingham Trent University. Paul's creative and critical thesis explores the presence and function of literary intertextuality in the hip-hop tradition. Specifically, it examines how these artists weaponize literary illusion and intertextuality. Paul is also an author and, as Cappo, a widely respected hip-hop artist. He is a graduate of the NTU BA English with Creative Writing and MA Creative Writing. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you very much, Zach. It's a real honor to be in such talented company tonight, and it's a real privilege to be supporting Billy Ivory, whom I've listened to over the years during my time as a mature student at NTU. As Zach was explaining, I've been lucky enough throughout my career, I've been lucky enough to have it culminate in this journey towards a doctorate, where I've been able to kind of bring my passion for English and literature and various authors, and I've been able to kind of bring it in conjunction with my own artistic practice. So I thought, and the main thing that I'm really passionate about is how rap artists in particular, they kind of draw power from one another's words and from external authors' words and from all sorts of myriad types of literature or media, and how they consolidate the powerful meaning in their own music through taking from others or paying deference or homage to others. So I wanted to present to you 3 different pieces today. The first one is almost an artistic illustration of what I feel the concept of intertextuality is. So this one is called Uzumaki, a ceaseless weaponized receipt of rhetoric, tapestries replete with myriad textured fabrics, multiple artistic signatures that's layered and stacked up until the fact of actual authorship no longer holds weight. See, that's my world you walk in. This my world and bond I place down. Modernist Stravinsky turned this wasteland to my playground. I'm stood upon the shoulders of Goliaths. I retain this ambiguous victory because all my picture cards are face down. Through the gaps and spaces in between, narration's omnipresent. I live through these bars I record. Ethereal, overworldly, grand imperial, pearls of wisdom shared like in the bars between Lamar and Shakur. Repetition plus revision, endless cycles, relentless spirals like Uzumaki, Junji Ito, raps deeper than Lovelace Deep Throat, rap game Heathledge, bad dreams in the night, I'm Heathcliff. Logged off from the clicks, I'm freed up. White deafened from this inhale, snow falls on cedar, hatred palpable, blood colder than reptiles, boundaries that standing out like petals on a wet bough. Apparitions, faces in a crowd. If language is commodity, then let me see these Ezra Pounds. Still, if the game is to be sold and never told completely, then let my 2-piece spicy without the rice be greasy. Let my blue cheese cap act as a blinding beacon, fracture the word symbolic. I'm searching for active listeners. See, I'm a scholar now, reporting from a foreign ground. The meaning's hidden within these posted letters like from captured prisoners. But enough now with the melodramatics. I separate emotion from pure science like medical practice. Wrought iron, still breaking them out of shape. Gifts for the sick-hearted, I brought flowers and sour grapes. Ideas I submit like pages to the telltale. Diary pages, equating to wages and self-help. Performance artists, play my part like no one else there. But peace to all them hardcore authors, writers, and pioneers. So for my second piece, as part of the process of doing this PhD and being able to work on my practice so much, I've noticed key flaws in my own practice that are almost like a process of artistic genealogy that I've engaged with. And as part of that, I came up with this piece that's titled America's Bastard. relics of a past regime. It's like stepping through a glass museum after the Blitzkrieg. Fragmented, all meanings being fractured, all decent narratives are in pieces. Breathe. Any parts that your palm touched, now deemed akin to bad luck charms and ill wills you can't touch. Any place that your feet fell, upturned and wiped clean, the last 10 to 15s is left to ruin. Whole truths are only in the present moment, until your gold tooth's exposed in that bed of roses. So take these words home and think them through, or the next rhyme I'm writing might be based upon your blood relations. I'm holding on to convos and information like it was my last days, so don't be surprised if I'm inundating you with 2,000 questions on the current state of the culture because I'm eagle-eyed. I clocked a pioneer walking I ain't seen in time. Years looking like they've been well, so nothing changes. Small talk and handshakes until we broke the Hovis. He introduced me to his up-and-coming protege. I'm noticing a 20 years gap between me and this artist. But at the same time, I'm clocking them common traits. Hunger for knowledge, a focused belief system. On these modern authors, we are locking horns in the debate. And as he's breaking down all of his idols, I'm noticing that all the names sprayed are UK-based, and it's dropping like an anvil on my mental. I've been ignoring my own backyard for 2 decades straight, only looking to the US for props and influence. See, that's when the rain breaks and we're forced to cut the talk short. But the reasons why I've ignored my own cohort have stayed with me, ruminating on the subject of why I despise how this country reinvents the spitter. Or is it something closer to home and hearing my own peers is too near to staring in the mirror and hating what I see there? For 20 years straight, I've imitated what I see and hear, 3,000 miles across the mid-Atlantic. I have to admit, I always have been America's bastard. So for my final piece, I just wanted to illustrate what I'm going to be kind of finalizing my PhD with, which is a trilogy album. And there's a character from a couple of the LPs that I wanted to introduce you to, who I'm trying to draw heavily from a James Joyce character from his novel Ulysses. His name is Leopold Bloom. And Leopold Bloom often thinks, or is written to think in this stream of consciousness. And what struck me is some of the ruminations that Leopold goes through with the passing of his young child, Rudy. So my character has recently experienced the event of a miscarriage. And so this piece was written about that event, and it's called Unborn Seed. Throwing this bracelet into the craters of the dark side of the moon. Name written and engraved on the chain is Unborn Seed. I never will hear your voice. I reckon you would have looked just like your brother or sister. Look, I'm throwing this bracelet into the craters of the dark side of the moon. Name written and engraved on the chain is Unborn Seed. I never will hear your voice. I reckon you would have looked just like. See, we never got to the point we could hear your heartbeat. You swam away. You entered the void so quick, I don't think I shed tears. While I was sat to the back of the bathroom door just listening, and your mum's inside, crying her heart out, crying enough for the both of us. And I'm thinking, in a world that's free to engage in relationships, that's free to. That's a world that'll make you feel that realest pain that will eat you up. See, I never said goodbye completely. I kept blinking, trying again and again for you. I'll tell you a secret. On the day that your mum went to the GP with the problems, I wasn't able to be there for you. I wasn't able to be there. But I needed a way to relate to you both. So I searched, looked around the bedsit until I found one single strand of your mum's hair. And I wrapped it around my wedding ring finger. And I laid there staring, I hoped and I prayed there. Yeah, I wrapped it around my wedding ring finger. And I laid there, hoping and praying. Superstitious ways of attempting to control is pathetic. But I can't help thinking the reason was the strand was synthetic. If I could have found one real piece, would I hear your voice now? If I could have found one real strand. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. That was great. And now I'll be introducing William Ivory. William Ivory was visiting professor on the NTU MA Creative Writing from 2013 to 2019 and remains a guest lecturer on the MA and friend of the program and department. He is a leading figure in the international film and theatre industry. His feature-length films have premiered internationally and won a number of awards. He has received major critical success for his work with his 7-part series, The Sins, winning the Edgar Allan Poe Award in New York, and his television drama, Journey to Knock, winning Best Screenplay and Best Single Drama at the European Television Awards, as well as Best Original Screenplay at the New York Television Festival. He also received outstanding critical acclaim for his feature film Made in Dagenham, starring Bob Hoskins, Miranda Richardson, and Sally Hawkins, winning Best Screenplay and Best Feature at Dinard Film Festival and Best Film at the Variety Club of Great Britain Awards. His film Torval and Dean was on ITV1 on Christmas Day 2018, and in 2019 he was awarded an honorary doctorate by NTU. Will, over to you.
Thank you, Zach. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, here we go then. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me here this evening. I'm really thrilled to take part in this event and to be sharing the platform with such talented writers, and it gives me special pleasure to hear Paul. I can remember reading something a few years ago now that Paul had written, and just thinking there's a rare and special voice here, and everything I hear there just confirms that. So terrific and humbling. I'm going to do a monologue now, and I'm going to try and perform it. And if this was a theatre now, that's the point at which you hear the seats going slap, 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 slap as everyone ran for the exit. But I have acted. I was going to show you some, whatever. I was going to put a hat on there as well, or something, or a false tash, to show you that I was a proper actor. But we'll just go with. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my monologue up onto the screen here, so I can give you maximum eye contact. Now then, but it might all go horribly wrong at this point, but hopefully it won't. There you go. And I can't tell now if it's all gone wrong. Rory, ring me, because I can't see anything now apart from this monologue. Okay, so I will begin. This is called Harry Daft Wins the FA Cup, and it's something that I wrote for Notts County on my football team a little while ago, and I'm really fond of it. Okay. Exterior, courthouse, day, 1894. A man of 28 sits on a wooden bench. He suddenly frowns as if seeing something. Then he stands. He nods slightly. I do. I'm Daft. I mean, it's my name, Harry Butler Daft. And I know you're probably making certain assumptions seeing me sitting here on high pavement outside the Shire Hall on a Monday morning. You'll be saying to yourselves, oh, he's probably some terrible young man gone out and got himself half larricked on home ales and schoons of sweet white wine from the Talbot on Slab Square before he adjourned to the Empire Dance Hall for about an indecorous staggering, followed, if I know his sort, by a brush with the law in the grounds of the university, said fisticuffs happening as a result of non-payment of a restaurant bill in the city centre and a dodged taxi fare from the Flying Horse to Beeston. And you'd be right, but I can explain. I'm a footballer, which I realise is no excuse. But honestly, is it any wonder after the day we'd had, eh? Oh, by the way, when I say we, I mean Notts County. That's who I turn out for, which is highly significant in accounting for the fact that I'm here about to appear before the Beak. Were I not a county man, I think there's every chance I'd never have got in any of that trouble on Saturday night. and my record would remain unblemished. I should say also, by way of mitigating circumstances, that I took the train back from Liverpool next to George Toon. Now, he's our goalie. He's a twist hand in the lace market, but more importantly, he's a goalkeeper, which those of you who follow the game will understand the full significance of, to wit. Plus, when you add in the fact of our 30 years anyway, on account of all the dust in that factory, well, you can see the odds were stacked against me right from the start, especially after the day we had, eh? But enough of excuses. I don't need to make excuses. I need only to deal in fact, in which case we need to go back a bit to January this year, when we were set to play Burnley in the Association Cup first round. Oh, the FA Cup. The very name transports you. It takes you places. Sorry, I need to stick to my thrust, which is we were drawn at home, Trent Bridge. The official attendance, 8,000. The atmosphere was therefore magnificent, and we were lined up in the traditional formation of 2-3-5. Yeah, don't talk to me about total football. Anyway, we won the toss and we kicked off. In the first half, we were playing into the wind. Oh, what a wind it was. Jimmy Logan, who we'd signed in October from Aston Villa for £30. Yes, you heard that right, £30, struggled to make any impression. Jimmy, who is a Scot, yet nevertheless a lovely man, happens to be, I think, one of the most skillful players in the English game. He's also the quickest thing I've ever seen in a sports stadium that wasn't wearing a striped vest and a muzzle. Yet, on that windswept afternoon, Jimmy barely got beyond the halfway line. The gale-force wind and the, what should we say, robust Burnley defending, combining to ensure that all of his darting runs were thwarted. Jimmy himself said later, "Hey, the miserable bastard spent the entire afternoon trying to kick me up in the air," which I think is a more accurate reflection of what actually went on. And while I do apologise for quoting Jimmy verbatim, I have to reiterate once more that he is Scottish and therefore genetically predisposed to the colourful use of language. Anyway, the game was played at a furious pace, and with a minute to go until half-time, it looked like we'd go in 0-0. But then, a long kick from our centre half-back and captain, David Calderhead, suddenly held up in the wind, foxing Espy, the Burnley kicker-in-chief, right half-back, and in a thrice, Logan was through. Full speed at last, his black and white shirt flapping in the gale, the crowd roaring him on. And as the ball dropped, we wondered whether he'd faint and try to deceive the goalie, but as Jimmy himself said afterwards, "I just thought I'd bang the bloody thing." And so he did, as hard as he could, and indeed, the ball shot into the net and Notts had the lead, a lead which we defended for the rest of that half and all of the second. By God, what a trial that final 45 minutes was. Burnley threw all they had at us, and I must confess, there were moments when I thought we'd never hang on. Sam Donnelly, our inside right, a coal miner, and a man not given to loquaciousness, shouted to us before the last corner, "Kick it, bite it, head it or punch it, ball or player, I don't care, but we will not give way now." Oh, it was inspiring. But then again, his Uncle Tom had been part of the siege at Mafeking, so we knew a thing or two about digging in till the relief came. And come it did, as the referee blew his whistle at last, and the Notts fans swarmed onto the pitch to cheer us into the next round. There, burnt wanderers awaited us. Now, I'm not going to say too much about this game, other than to point out that it was played at the Derby Turn, Burton-on-Trent. This is a pitch, not so much with a slope, as a rendering of the Cresta Run in miniature. On an icy day, it is truly terrifying experience to sprint onto a long ball and realise that there's every chance not only that you will slide off the end of the pitch before you can stop, but you will be well past the refreshment stand and halfway through the gentleman's conveniences before you can lay your hands on anything which might slow down your progress and act as a brake. Please, anyone sniggering? It's not that sort of monologue. Anyway, the Wanderers are used to this escarpment. So at our training camp the week before at the Star and Garter pub, Hazelford Ferry, we hatched a brilliant plan by which Theo Harper, our right back, another Collier, and Jack Hendry, our left back, he's a gardener, they would, this is the term we used, man for man, mark the two Capes brothers, Burton's danger men, and the players most adept at using the slope. They would track, shadow, and if all else failed, kick the Burton wingers long before they could use their own advantage against us. And as it turned out, the plan worked a dream. And we hammered them 2-1. Sam scoring from a goal-mouth scramble, and then Jimmy adding the second from the penalty spot. And that, ladies and gentlemen, saw us into the quarterfinals. Oh, the quarterfinals. The sharp end. And who did we play? Well, the Daily Express paper put it thus. When the news of the draw for the quarter-final reached Nottingham, it could only be equalled by the agitation felt if the British government had declared war with Russia or France, which honestly is overdoing it a bit. But it is true there was considerable excitement in the city because Notts had drawn. Notts had drawn. I can't do it. I can't say the name. They'd drawn. Oh, bottom of Arkwright Street, the Crown. Oh, the town ground. Nottingham Forest. They'd drawn Nottingham Forest, please. No more booing. Let's not be partisan. We want to make this thing pass off without too much violence. Well, the first thing to be said about this game was that 15,000 spectators journeyed past the Midland station and into the Forest ground to see it. The takings for the day were £650, the second highest ever for a cup match in this country, beaten only by the semi-final of the previous year when Blackburn Rovers had played Wolverhampton Wanderers. Now, I hear you ask, why all of this fiscal and statistical detail? We want to know what happened in the game. Well, I'll tell you, it was a draw, 1-1 after extra time, nothing more to say. Well, except that I didn't actually witness anything beyond the 4th minute of the match, having sustained at that moment a paralysing kick in the gonads, visited on me in a quite deliberate manner by McInnes, the Forest left wing and eventual goal scorer after 38 minutes. As Jimmy said to him when he turned away in celebration, "You shouldn't have even been on the pitch, you bastard. The way you kicked that wheel out of the bollocks." And he was right. But McInnes was on the pitch, whereas I was in the city hospital, my legs quite wide apart, wrapped in a cold compress and chewing aspirin. But justice was done in the end, since on the cusp of half-time, Daniel Bruce, our inside left, rifled a shot into the top left-hand corner of their goal. I heard then that he turned to the Forest fans and he shouted, "That one's for Harry." Oh, it was a great moment. One of them assaulted him, but we all agreed afterwards it was a point worth making. Alas, though, we couldn't go on and win the game, despite having the better of it, then and in extra time. So in the end, 1-1 stood, and a replay was the result. Of course, the draw took place before that happened, so we knew, should we beat Forest, who we would play in the semis. And that team would be none other than the mighty Blackburn Rovers. A great side, the greatest side, undoubtedly the favourites for the cup, and yet we felt sure we could take them. For all their skill, they were slow at the back, and Jimmy, Daniel and I were certain we could run them ragged if we were just given half a chance, if we could just beat Forest in the replay. Beat them? We bloody stuffed them, 4-1. Jimmy got the opener, Daniel a brace, and Sam Donnelly the other. I never came close, though I did toe that bastard McInnes right up the arse when he tried to head a corner. So for me, the day was nigh on perfect. Yet always, at the back of your mind in these moments, is the fear of failure. Every step you take towards your goal, every round that gets you closer to your ultimate dream, the potential for disappointment, for terrible and crushing anticlimax becomes greater and greater. I'm sorry, I'm a Notts player. You have to vector in disappointment. And don't forget, we were the only second division team left. The day we beat Forest, the bookmakers announced the odds as to who would eventually lift the cup. Blackburn Rovers, evens. Bolton Wanderers, 5-2. Sheffield Wednesday, 7-2, all first division sides. And dear old Notts County, 8-1, rank outsiders. Yet, we had beaten the old enemy, and we did genuinely think we had the pace to trouble the Lancastrians. So gradually, as we got back to training, we learned only to listen to the voices we'd heard in our heads when the draw had first been announced. The voices which said, "Come on, my ducks, we can do this. We can win the semi-final. We're Notts County." And that's how we stayed, until we walked out at Bramall Lane in Sheffield on Saturday, March the 10th, 1894. Then we collectively shat our pants. It was terrifying. 20,000 in the ground, and hundreds more we knew back in Nottingham, gathered by the local newspaper officers outside the Lion Hotel, anywhere where telegrams might be expected to arrive, thence to relay the condition of the match. The match, it was a blur. The start especially, partly the nerves, partly the realisation that those pedestrian Blackburn defenders were a little less pedestrian than we'd anticipated. And Chippendale, Dewar and Anderson looked like they could take us on their own. But we hadn't come this far just to roll over. And gradually, after the first 10 minutes, we started to assert some control. And I started to get a bit more room out on the left. More and more room, in fact, until, after 15 minutes, I took a pass from Al Shelton and instantly looked up expecting the tackle. but no tackle came. I wasn't pressed at all. Haydock and Brandon were so worried about Jimmy and Daniel, they turned their backs and were chasing after them, attempting to get on their goal side, leaving me with a clear run. So run I did, dropping my right shoulder, then slipping the ball to my left before I glanced up once more, hoping to see the captain making a run for the back post. But he was far off, nursing an injury. I looked the other way, hoping to see Jack advancing on the overlap. Only he wasn't there either, so I ran on further, the ball out in front, my ears pounding and my chest screaming, except there was no one to pass to. And as I bore down on the goal, frankly, I was devoid of ideas. Smack the bloody thing, you great big useless wazzock! You see, that's the difference. The greats know how to behave in a crisis. Jimmy knew what to do, leather it. So I did. In all honesty, I didn't catch it cleanly, but a daisy cut is as good as a thunderbolt if the goalie doesn't see it coming. And he didn't. He didn't see it at all. In fact, I think the ball was already nestling in the net before he started to dive. Get in there! I'd done it! I'd scored in the FA Cup semi-final. Harry Daft had rifled in the only goal. Yeah, the only goal. We beat them 1-0. And, well, let me read you this from the Northern Daily Telegraph. The unexpected has happened, and the favourites for the English Cup have been knocked out in the semi-final by a team which up to a little over a week ago was regarded as a rank outsider. That was us. That was Notts County. And shortly after 5 o'clock, the news had reached the city, zinging down telegraph wires and bursting out into the waiting streets, so that by the time we returned from Sheffield on the 1840 Saloon Special, a train with no fewer than 20 carriages, the largest train ever sent out from Nottingham, by then, several thousand people were waiting for us, thronged along the platform edge and strung across the bridge of the Midlands station. They were beyond there too, so that as we tried to make our way to the club headquarters on Clumber Street, cramped in a horse and carriage, the crowd of cheering supporters had become so great, we had to disembark at the end of Station Street and walk the rest of the way. And every step we took, a hand slapped us on the back, a beer froth moustache leaned in, and a voice said, "Don't you dare drop a bollock and muck it up now." We didn't need telling. I can admit to you here and now that the time between the semi and the final, Christ, it was hard. Couldn't concentrate at work, at home, at all. That fear again. And now, worse than ever, we were 90 minutes from immortality. 90 minutes from a time when the city would remember our names forever. Well, the 31st of March, 1894 finally came, and we travelled to Goodison Park, Liverpool, where 37,000 people gathered for the match, and in truth, for the ritual slaughter of Notts County. We'd had our day in the sun. Second Division Notts had slayed their Goliath when they beat Blackburn in the semi. Now against the also mighty Bolton Wanderers, they would at last get their comeuppance. We didn't. We were bloody magnificent. Right from the kick-off, we took control, handling our nerves better than they. And also it seemed on a sweltering day when thick cloud exacerbated the already humid conditions by being the fitter team too. Of course, these aren't in themselves game-changing matters, but one other thing was, I scored a bloody great hat-trick! He did too. Jimmy Logan got 3 of our 4 goals. Arthur Watson and Clarke on our outside right, he got the other as we routed the Wanderers 4-1. Had it not been for Sutcliffe in the Bolton goal, we would have had 6. As to Jimmy, the Athletic newspaper said, 3 goals out of 4 in a final tie is an enduring testimonial to Logan's brilliance and confirms his reputation as one of the deadliest shots in the British Isles. He was, and I played alongside him on one of the proudest days of my life, in this club's life, and I shall never forget it. Unlike much of the rest of that Saturday, you see, after 17 years of trying to win the cup, of trying to bring the silverware back to Nottingham, for many of us to finally do so well, that was a cause for something beyond celebration. It was a cause to get paralytically drunk, and we did. But as I said before, there were other mitigating factors. For a start, the Notts directors had provided us all with luncheon baskets to be had on the train as we returned from Liverpool's Central Station. Unfortunately, they had also provided a dozen bottles of champagne, which it turns out don't mix well with brown ale and pork pie. What is more, any intention I might have had to retire quietly to my digs in Sneinton as soon as we returned to Nottingham, thereby removing the possibility of worsening my inebriated state, That was stymied by George, our goalie. Remember goalies? Who said it would be wicked to pass up the chance to celebrate with all those who wanted to cheer us on in our moment of victory. And he was right and all. It would have been. So I don't care, I'm here now to answer for what became, well, truly operatic later in the evening, because that night, ladies and gentlemen, that night after we had stepped off the train and journeyed once more to Notts County headquarters at the Line Hotel, that night will be with me until the day I die. It was 10:30 by the time we pulled in. By then, Station Street was solid. Thousands of people, thousands, had come to greet us, cheering and shouting, while one fellow banged a drum and a line of youths sat on the railway walls and banged their heelings against the enamel advertising hoardings, keeping time to the drums, boom, boom, boom. And then something amazing happened. A woman began to hum, and the man next to her, he picked it up, and soon the whole crowd had joined in with the same unmistakable tune, Handel's "See the Conquering Heroes Come." And we did. On an open carriage, pulled by 4 horses, we rode and we showed the cup up Station Street, along Carrington Street, onto Listergate, and then finally passing into Clumber Street. All the way, black and white bunting hung from the lampposts, along with many supporters too. Chinese lamps and flags being strung up as well, while the trams which normally pass the streets could no longer run. Such was the crush of the crowd. And still through it all we heard, "See the conquering heroes come," until at last we were outside the Line Hotel and, well, you know what happened then. That's why I'm here, outside the court. But like I say, I don't care. I don't regret it after the day we'd had, eh? A day when we had become heroes, when we had conquered all. We were Notts County, and we won the FA Cup. That's it.
Thank you, William. That was great, and that really made me laugh as well.
It was brilliant. Thank you. I'm now going to join Zach, and we're going to do the Q&A together. But I think if you've got a question to start, I think Zach, and I'll read the chat comments. If anyone wants to ask any questions, stick them in the Q&A box, and if you've got any comments, stick them in the chat, and we'll go through as many as we can. Over to you, Zach.
Thank you, Rory. Yes. So my first question will be for William. You've just performed a monologue for us, and you're an illustrious screenwriter as well. However, you used to be an actor. Why did you stop being an actor?
Oh, Zach. It's a bit, I mean, I can do sort of stuff like that. I mean, I'm not very good at it, is the honest truth. And I think it gave me up more than I gave it up. But also, it's so boring. You know, if you're filming something, we used to shoot 14 hours of film and we'd get 3 minutes worth of material that we could use at the end of a 14-hour day. So that meant you were doing 3 pages of dialogue a day. And if you're an actor that's waiting around all day to do that, it's just boring. And in the end, I just got to the stage where, and particularly if you're the bloke who's coming on, you know, to pour someone's tea because you haven't got one of the star roles, or that's even duller. So honestly, it was a mixture of the two. I'm not very good at it, and also just the. I mean, I love it, as you can see from that. I mean, I love having a go at it, but it's Amdram with me. Yeah, so that's why.
All right, thank you.
I committed the sin of talking while on mute. I've got a question here for Paul from Carol Leeming, who herself is a wonderful writer and performer. Question to Paul in relation to what you said regarding your piece prior to America's Bastard. Has this had any impact on you or on the British influence beyond themes, lyrics, etc., in terms of, say, rhythm?
I still prioritize US rap artistry. I think I'm stubborn now. I've become stubborn in my ways of what I take as an influence, and I think I treat rap lyricism as such a potent thing that can affect me, that if I hear something that's too close to home, it can have a negative effect for a long time on me. So I steer clear of it. So it's still something that I need to address. So it's something that I'll address in the future, I guess.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's in the voice of your work. I'm going to come to a question about that in a minute. But over to you again, Zach.
We've got another question from Emma Rayner, and it asks, is this based on a historical fact? And if so, how do you research it? And what's your creative process for translating it into a first-person monologue? And that's for William.
Yeah, I mean, it was Colin Slater. Some people will know him. He's a wonderful fellow, brilliant commentator, and he used to commentate on all the Notts County. He was a Notts County correspondent for 55 years. Poor bugger, who gets to do something so bad that you have to report on Notts for 55 years. But be that as it may, he wrote a book about Notts County when they won the one time they won the FA Cup in 1894. And then he said to me, he rang me one Thursday and said, "Can you do a speech for Saturday?" And he said, "I'll send you the book." So I got that on the Friday, which was that thick. And then and so then I just scrambled it. I just just wrote down. And then the process for me is I like to sort of think of any kind of adaptation as you just put the walls up. And I did that like we made in Dagenham, and I'm doing something at the moment which is based on fact, is that you just make sure that the walls are absolutely right, that this thing happened on this day and that thing happened on that day, and then just leave myself loads of room to just play with it in the middle, because I think we're dramatists ultimately, and so if you get too swamped in the detail, you start being a documentary maker, and I think that's something different.
Yeah, brilliant. I'm going to read some of the comments and then pass back to Zach, who's got a few more questions of his own, brilliant questions. So I'll just read a few of the comments, if that's all right with you, Zach. Loving the monologues all, says Becky Cullen, who's obviously a friend of all of ours and a colleague. Thoughtful, moving monologues, says Carol Leeming. Powerful work, Paul. Still bringing more fire, Paul. Brilliant piece. There's a lot of love for you, Paul, here. Very moving, very powerful. Thank you, says Jade Curley. And really fantastic pieces. I'll pass over to you, Zach, but if any of you have any more questions, please pop them in the Q&A.
Thank you, Rory. We do have some more questions indeed. And this one's from Shannon, and she asks, what would be the greatest piece of advice you would give to somebody with no previous experience who wanted to try out script writing? And I'm guessing that is to William.
Yeah, I'll start that one, Zach, and then I'd love to know what Jade and Teya and Lesley and in terms of because I think because I've been doing it donkey's years now, it sort of changes. I think as you get a bit older, but I mean, there are certain truths which people said to me, and I don't know whether the other writers. And Paul, whether you feel the same way as well, but you have got to write what you know. I mean, that's just a fact that I think you have to. And I found what Paul was saying actually was fascinating about how whether you call it homage but we all. I mean, somebody will know. There's a very famous Oscar Wilde quote, isn't there, about borrowing and stealing and all the rest of it. And I'm afraid I don't know it. You might know it, Rory. You're a cleverer man than me. I know that. But essentially, the advice I would give would be just look at the work of the people that you really love and you really, really admire, and be apps and look at all of it and learn from it and see what's brilliant about it, but also see the holes in it, because there'll be holes in the good stuff as well. And then don't be scared to borrow like mad from that. Really don't be afraid to but then then translate it, translate it into your life and the things that you know about, and that really would be, because in terms of writing, you're going to write a I would never say to me, write thrillers because thrillers sell well, or historical, this is doing well at the moment, so write historical. I think you've just got to write the thing that makes you want to get out of bed in the morning and go back to it, and stay up late at night. So that would be my advice. But I'd love to know what those who are sort of at a much earlier stage than me feel about
that. Shall I go? Yeah, I think I'd echo what William was just saying in terms of writing what you know, but also watch the excellent and watch the terrible. Like William said, there's going to be holes in even the good stuff, but it's, if you watch what you don't think is good, or even what is renowned for not being particularly successful, you'll always be able to learn from it, in the sense that you can choose what you can avoid. And equally in the terrible, there's going to be some things there that you can take from it more positively. And I would also say take opportunities, scour the internet. There's loads of screenwriting opportunities. Make connections all the time, and trust your instinct in your writing as well. Sometimes you'll have work that you're really proud of, but it just doesn't quite fit. There's an age-old phrase, kill your darlings, and sometimes it's really painful. But if it doesn't work with your work, just trust your instinct, and you can always use it at a different point in a different piece of work. But good luck.
Does anyone else want to come in on that? Teya or Lesley or Paul?
When I've started on the course for screenwriting, and I hadn't realised what a skilled and difficult thing it was, I thought, well, if you can write a script, and you can't. It's rather like learning to ride a bike. You can be given a bike and you can get on a bike. It doesn't mean you can pedal the bloody thing anywhere, And it's been quite hard work, but very satisfying to try and stop your stuff sounding so inane. You want to flush it down the toilet, it's so bad. But you've got to start somewhere and just keep building on that and building on that and building on that till you get to somewhere. But I do feel that I would never be able to get to the heights of people like Mr. Ivory. Really, it's hard work.
Well, can I just come back there, Zach, on that? And it's interesting what you're saying, though, Lesley, because it's like, I remember somebody saying to me, I wrote every day from when I was 13 until I was 27, before I had any joy with anything. And I mean, every day. I should have been going out getting girlfriends and things, but I wasn't. I was writing, and so there's a lot of stuff. And I've gone back over a lot of my work, thinking what hidden gems are here, and the answer's none. And then somebody subbed it up much better, who said to me, they said, you never drink the first pint you pull. You always pull off a couple of pints first. And so much of it is that thing of, it is hard. It's like any discipline, and screenwriting's odd because we're so versed in its language, into social media, a lot of Snapchat and Instagram and so things like that. We're working with image and word all the time now. So we all kind of we're sort of fluent in it, but in terms of actually then controlling the beast, that you just have to. It takes a lot of practice, and I think that what you're talking about, Lesley, is that it's that process. And as I say, it took me, I can't do the maths, but from 13 to 27, before I got something, that was kind of acceptable. And I think that's really hard, that, because sometimes we're more impatient than that. We're more impatient than that.
Thank you. That's very encouraging. Thanks.
Pleasure.
Thank you for that, William. And we've got another question. Actually, we've got lots of questions flooding in. This is amazing. This one's for Paul, and it's from Jamie. And Jamie asks, what are your all-time favorite hip-hop albums?
My all-time favorite hip-hop album, the one that's had most influence on me for the longest amount of time, is Nas' Illmatic, his debut album. I think that's up there in the canon of hip-hop albums for most people. And Nas in particular is a lyricist who I've always respected for many reasons. Like his ability with words is second to none, and I feel his influence has been huge on past generations after him. I think one of the things that really influences me about Nas is his ability to express a sense of vulnerability in his work whilst engaging with a very a hyper masculine kind of art form. He's still able to kind of enable the listener to have this connection with him, and formulate this kind of catharsis for his art form. But yeah, I was very heavily influenced by the mid-90s, so Biggie Smalls' Ready to Die album and Life After Death, and Nas and Mobb Deep, and various other New York-based rap artists were the lyricists for me. Really, they were my that was my era and my genre.
Thanks, Paul. I'm just going to pop in with a question now. Hope you don't mind, Zach. I know there are loads more to get through. I know that Billy's daughter Tilly, in Brighton no less, once sent him a link to a Cappo track saying, check this out, it's brilliant and really authentically Nottingham, right? And it strikes me that several of our 5 writers tonight, maybe all of you actually, to most of you, if not all of you, it seems really important to represent at least sometimes a local, regional, or perhaps national voice. I know these are very different things. So to those of you to whom it applies, I wonder if you just say a few words about the importance of what might be called regionalism or regional representation to you as a writer or performer. And I think I'll ask that to Billy first, then Paul, since they're the two who indirectly inspired the question, then open it to Teya and Lesley and Jade as well. So start with that.
Yeah, but I just want to say, by the way, Paul, that was in all my years of trying to get any credibility with my daughter. That was it was instant, it was fantastic. I said, yeah, I know him. And it was bloody brilliant. Yeah. But anyway, it was wonderful. Well, no, the thing is, Rory, I mean, I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's there are rhythms that you know that you hear that I've heard all my life, and I was trying to explain this to somebody the other day actually about a character I'd written in a drama, and it was from Nottingham, and they were talking about the way he spoke and everything, and I said, yeah, but that's kind of who he is. It's where he's from, and they said, what, the accent? I went, no, it's just the way. And for me, as I get older, I'm convinced that the East Midlands, Nottingham particularly, is the place of anticlimax. I can't put it any better than that. And which just saying it makes me laugh, because and so much of the sort of so much of the best example I give you, I'm sure I've said this to you before, Rory. I went to see my Auntie Stella, and I ran in. I was dead excited because I was going to get married, and my wife to be just accepted. And I rushed in and I said, Auntie Stella, I'm getting married. We're going to get married. And she looked at me. She went, yes. She said, and when poverty walks through that door, love will fly out that window. And that for me is kind of, so it's kind of about the language, but it's also where that language is from. Do you know what I'm trying to say, Paul, in that? It's the language is the place, isn't it? Beyond
Yeah, I think I'm slightly different to you, because I think I think you engage heavily in like character studies in a way. I mean, I'm assuming this, but with the way that you write different characters, whereas for me, apart from when I've engaged with creative writing, I only write from my own perspective. So with speaking of dialect or regional aspects of my work, I find it interesting that I can kind of put different rhymes together that other people from different areas can't. So that there lies my kind of special weapon in my vocabulary, because I'm able to utilize the O in a different way, like the O115, those type of things. So I'm able to utilize it in a unique way as to a person from Birmingham. So it's a weapon in the arsenal, isn't it, for me? So that's what I'd say. I just like to experiment with it. But I think we differ in that way, because you draw upon the language for the characters that you work with, I'm assuming. Whereas I'm from a personal perspective, I'm coming from more personal anyway, I think.
Thanks. Yeah, let's open that to the rest of you, Lesley and Jade and Teya, if any of you have.
Well, I come from West London, and when the Victoria train is going in, I can feel my heart change, because after all these years, I'm still going home. And I was once in Paris and I heard my West London accent, which isn't the suburbs. It's not your Wembleys and your Harrows. That's where the posh people lived. It was an inner London accent, but a West London accent. I just went over to this group of taxi drivers because I'd heard their accent, and I said, I know where you're from. And of course, because they were taxi drivers, they knew every road, everything about it. And my daughter said, you're so embarrassing, Mum. But it was the accent. It's like a love affair and you can't let it go. So even now, if I hear a West London accent, if I accost anybody in the street, it's quite innocent. I just have noticed the accent. That's what I find anyway.
I think I'd agree with that actually, Lesley, because being from Birmingham originally, I'm in Nottingham now, but there is this draw, and in terms of writing, like, for example, I don't necessarily write with Brummies or Birmingham in mind, but as exemplified in my monologue, I did naturally use a Brummie accent because it felt like I'm aware that it can be humorous to others, and it just brings an extra dimension. I think in terms of regionalism, if you are writing about the particular place that you're from, it links to writing what you know, and perhaps link into your class as well, perhaps. Brummies are deadpan and sarcastic, and I can't necessarily always have all of my characters being deadpan and sarcastic. It would be a marvelous Brummie series perhaps, but I think for a bit of a range, I don't know, but yeah, I think regionalism does have its place, but as a writer, it's also nice to explore and to appreciate different perspectives as well.
I wonder if Teya's got anything to add. I don't want to put you on the spot, Teya, but and it's not regionalism and it's not really nationalism either. But I know you have a real fascination and a really detailed knowledge of Bulgarian folk tales, and I don't suppose this piece necessarily came into this piece tonight, but it does come into some of your other works. Maybe you could talk about how that is the case a little bit.
Yeah. No, it doesn't come in this work, what I just read at all. This is just feelings that you can feel on the moon.
Yeah.
In wherever you could go, that's just something you carry with you. And to be fair, I do like to kind of focus on character inner exploration, and it doesn't matter where you are. It matters what you feel to me as a writer. So I do actually, if anything, try to get away from, I don't identify myself much as being from anywhere. It's just I'm interested in certain places, because I've moved a lot. I've got parents from different countries, so that kind of gives you a bit different perspective on the world, as opposed to if you just live in one place your whole life.
Yeah, for sure.
But that being said, obviously moving about, you get to get used, you are faced with different coaches, different type of thinking, different kind of expression, if you will. So this is not really nothing to do with what I just read, but the cultures are something that I'm really interested in. So yeah, that's what you mean. What I wrote about. My undergraduate dissertation was focused around that. It was Balkan pagan folklore and how this has gone into Christian folklore. So it's got to do a lot of history as well, which is something I'm interested, not only creatively, but just like in this kind of history. But for this particular piece, it's just not, I can't tell you anything about it.
No, it's not related to this piece, is it? But
English, and I was taught an RP English, so that's just how I learned it. I have got a regional English, I've got a learn at school English, so I can't really kind of quite answer this question the way everybody.
Brilliant though, really interesting. And I would like to draw everyone's attention to a couple of blog posts that Teya wrote for the Nottingham Creative Writing Hub blog about her interest in those folktales. They're really interesting. Zach, back to you for the questions. Sorry, I've stolen a lot of time there.
No worries. We've got another question. Billy, was it really difficult to find any inspiration in lockdown? And are there any tropes that you think are overdone or should be avoided?
Sorry, just, well, no, answer the question. Okay, I'll start. I found it very difficult lockdown actually, as you might know, I wrote a little piece for ITV called Mike and Rochelle, which was done at the very start of lockdown. And it's interesting because it kind of reflected where I was then, which was slightly hysterical, but at the same time, sort of that I was using that to fuel a certain amount of creativity. But as time's gone on, I found partly because I worry about my health a lot, and it's not a very attractive trait at all. And I know there are lots of I know I'm very lucky to sort of be able to keep working and to live where I do and all those sort of things. But it doesn't stop me being quite worm-like anyway. And so the combination of sort of worrying about health and then not being able to be nourished. I mean, I find that. Going to the cinema, I normally go to the cinema 3 or 4 times a week, and try and go to the theatre every fortnight or so. And if you're not getting that, if you're not being fed that, I mean, because I find reading very difficult. It's a very creative process, I think, reading more than watching, and so I find that I love reading poetry, but part of the reason I like reading poetry is you can just read one poem, and that's usually enough for me in a day without feeling kind of sort of deluded by it almost. But so in terms of any reading I do, I just read cheap sort of American detective novels. So I'm not getting anything back from that, So I found it, but to be honest, Zach, I found it quite tricky, and not being able to go to football, and although they stream that now and everything. But all those sorts of things are quite difficult. And in terms of what you said about tropes, do you mean in terms of within the lockdown, or do you mean that people fall back on if they're not generally being sort of stimulated? Because I think lots of writers have tricks and I think actors are the same. You see it with actors, and it's really interesting. It's why the smart actors become film stars, because then you only see them do it twice a year, and so you don't start to see. But if you're in something like ER or something like or a show that's on every week, you suddenly see, oh, okay, they do that, and writers are no different. And it's really interesting. And what they say, it's the thing about boxing. They say with boxers that the last thing to go is your punch, and the first thing that goes is your legs. So what happens is you end up you stand there for 15 rounds getting battered, because your legs have gone and you've got nothing to draw on there, so you can't keep out of trouble. But you've still got this bloody great punch that if you can, and occasionally you'll land it. And that for a writer is the thing they do. And what that means is, though, even though your legs are gone and you're out on your feet and you should really have thrown the towel in and taken all them things, you don't, and then what you do is you start to just deliver. And I've done it myself. I try not to do it too often because I think it's such an easy thing to fall into. You start to deliver the thing that you're known for. And it's one of the things I hate critics. I would cheerfully, I just hate them. I'd take any one of them into a room and beat them. But what you'll see often in a review is this is a return to form. And they mean literally that. So and they say that as if it's a good thing. So, William Ivory's new drama is a real return to form. And what I'm hearing is, so I've now written it the way I used to, which is the way you find acceptable and that you can consume like that. But all that does is encourage, and that thing about tropes is the same thing. It's about writing to form. And I think you have to work really, really hard just to say to yourself, am I now doing am I doing the writing equivalent of pornography? Is this all about the climax and about no context? And that's what I think.
What a brilliant answer. I'll just give a plug to Mike and Rochelle, actually, because your Billy's isolation stories episode. There were 4 in I think April, maybe May. It's brilliant. It's one of the most perfect 11 or 12 minutes of television I've ever seen in my life. It's funny and moving, and it's wonderful. And the quotation you were going for earlier was T.S. Eliot, something like "Good poets borrow, great poets steal." And this is my my sort of crampon on the edifice of greatness, is that I've been inspired by that poem by that bit of television to write a poem that I've called Lockdown Man. I was thinking kind of Grauble Man or Tollens Man or maybe even Piltdown Man when I did it. But yeah, you've inspired that. It's available, actually, the TV program, to anyone through NTU, anyone at NTU through Boxer Broadcasts. You can find that. Isolation Stories, Mike and Rochelle. Well worth looking up. I'm going to pass back to you in a moment, Zach, but there are just a couple of things I wanted to say from the comments. There are a couple of questions that I think are important and a few nice comments as well. Andrew Taylor, who I happen to know is an Evertonian, says, "Great to hear Goodison, the grand old lady, appear, Billy. Really enjoyed the monologue." And various other lovely comments as well. But here's the question, and I'll put both of these together because they're they're interrelated. What would be the greatest piece of advice you would give to somebody with no previous experience who wanted to try out script writing? And what advice would you give to an amateur scriptwriter who would like to get noticed by professionals? Over to you, Billy. I think this is your one. Oh, you're muted. I can't lip read, I'm afraid.
No, it's all right. I knew there'd come a point where I get it wrong, but it's only once wrong. That's okay. I think we touched on this a little bit earlier in terms of the creative side of it. I think in terms of that thing of writing about what you know, and I think that what Jade said was really interesting in that as well, about not being prepared, not being afraid to critique the stuff that's bad. And I think the other thing that Jade said, which I think is also really interesting, is about trusting your inner voice, and that even if you're not having success with a piece, if you believe in it, move it to one side and then potentially be prepared to work with the people who have shown interest in your work. And that kind of then comes on to the second part of the question, which is, how do you get yourself noticed? If you're an amateur script writer, and it's much harder now. I hate to be sort of depressing in this respect, but when I started out, it was so easy because the great the very great BBC, one of the greatest cultural jewels, which they're after, and they will kill eventually. Had so much opportunity for young writers to get noticed. They had a thing called Screenplay, Screen 2, that were basically for people starting out. But one of the they're all gone now. So what I would say is, it's a bit like the other advice. Find the programs that you've watched on the BBC, on ITV, on Netflix, and find out who's produced them. Look to the end of the program and find out if they're made by, and these days they'll probably be made by a production house, Red Productions or New Pictures or The Forge or something like that. And find out who the producer is, find out who the production company is. Go and look at, get on the net then and look at that production company and see the work that they've done. And with luck, or there's a good chance that if you've identified that program as something that feels, if it's the thing that you go, I wish I'd written that, chances are they share the same taste as you as a company. So, and then hopefully when you look at the other work that they've produced, you'll also see, oh yeah, I did see that, I love that, or I didn't like as much. And then you'll realize that if you're going to push anywhere, kick at any door, that's a good door to kick at. Because I had, my first series, Common as Muck, was turned down for 4 years before it was picked up, and good companies turning it down, until I got to this chap who'd made a show that actually was very like it and liked that sort of work, and somebody told me about him, and I managed to get the script to him, and then he went, oh yeah, I love this. So what I would do, as I say, is identify the work you like, identify who makes it, identify who the producers are, and then write to that company and say, this is me, this is the work I'm interested in. Don't send a script. If you haven't got an agent, they won't read it. Even if you've got an agent, there's a good chance they won't read it. What you need to do is be able to write a page, and if there's a specific story that you want to be able to tell, that you've got a script that you think will really make a great film or a 6-part drama or whatever it may be, summarize it in a paragraph and say, I'm often down in London, even if you're not. I used to say that all the time and then just lie and then flog stuff to get down there. So I'm often in London. Is there any chance I could come in and have a cup of tea with you and talk about it? You'll have a lot of disappointment, but you will hopefully get somebody who will, because they need material. That's the point. That's the one thing we've got to remember, is that the machine needs feeding so much now, round the clock, 24/7. And so they can't afford to dismiss you entirely. So you want to give them as little as possible, not too much, because that makes it easier for them to dismiss you, but give them just enough so they go, bugger it, I'll give him, or give her, I'll send them an email, I'll have a Zoom, I'll do whatever. And so that would be my advice, be really, really forensic about choosing the right people to go to. So that was a long reply, but I think it's very daunting without knowing that.
It's a brilliant reply, and that sort of detailed reply and that knowledge, as well as your brilliance as an artist, is a reason why you teach on the MA every year. That's why we want you there. Thank you so much. That's really helpful. Zach, I'm going to pass to you. We've got several more questions. We are approaching an hour and a half. I think what we'll say, Zach, is should we have 3 more questions? You pick one, I pick one, and then you pick the last one.
Yeah, sure.
We'll do that. So we're closed to questions, I'm afraid. New questions coming in.
This one's from John, and it goes to William. And John asks, who are your heroes and how do you rate John Sullivan?
My heroes. Oh, that's quite easy for me, I think. Joe Strummer, John Keats, Andrew Marvell. I've got a few. Jack Rosenthal, Donna Francis Child. Sullivan's a genius, I think, an absolute genius. And Fools and Horses is just sublime. One of the things I always say on the course to young writers or to newbie writers is, and this is a really it's an obvious thing, but by God, it's a good, even if I say so myself, good bit of advice. If you're writing comedy and there's a funny line and you give that funny line to another character and it's still funny, you're knackered. And Sullivan is a master of that not being the case. The line is funny because Delboy's saying it. The line is funny because Rodney's saying it. If you swap it round, so it's all character comedy. So he's fluent. He writes. He's fluent in Rodney. He's fluent, and that's true of, like, Steptoe and Son. Again, I've got so many heroes, and so many of them. Galton and Simpson, similarly, are great heroes of mine, and Croft and Perry, and but what they all do is they create brilliant comedy from character. There are other, thinking about directors as well. Andrea Arnold, somebody I admire so much, and as a director. But in terms of those writers, it's funny. All the writers I really admire, they've got this kind of mixture of passion and humour. There you go. Try and shut me up.
Thank you for that.
I can mute you. I've got the power to mute anyone, so not that I would. There's a question here for Paul from Emma Rayner. Has Paul taken inspiration from Shakespearean Soliloquy? I'm new to his work, but there are parallels. So exciting to hear and watch an artist in this genre about which I know very little.
Oh, thank you very much for the compliment. I've engaged with Shakespeare on a very distant level, so I wouldn't say that I've taken anything specifically from him, but I guess I resonate with the more macabre elements of the Soliloquy, Hamlet, those type of self-analysis, self-doubt. I guess that's what rings true with me. Kind of, that's when I put pen to paper, that's really what is I'm trying to register, or that's really what I'm trying to work out within myself often, which is probably why, just moving on from that comment, is why that I have to do my work in short bursts, kind of just to make sure that I can dip in and dip out and make sure that I don't wallow or stay too long in that kind of melancholic creative inspiration zone.
Yeah, Paul does do. I mean, I have the real privilege of being Paul's director of studies for his PhD, and I see that practice very much. He'll focus very much on critical ideas, and then suddenly it's all about his own creative work, and the two end up influencing one another in a kind of step-by-step way. Paul, just to extend that a little bit, what poets and novelists and those kind of writers particularly do inspire you in your writing?
Novelists, it goes to the kind of, I wouldn't say it's the angry young man, that kind of theme or that trope, but it's novels that deal with. Knut Hamsun was a real influence for me with his novel or novella called Hunger, which was about a protagonist who's literally starving, very, very isolated, dealing with isolation, and how their thoughts form through that isolation, through that starvation. So a lot of influence on novels. I think Bukowski's one as well, his poetry as well. A lot of his work came through periods of isolation, and you kind of I suppose it's kind of wallowing, isn't it? I don't know really, but John Fonte as well was an interesting writer for me, especially Ask the Dust, which dealt with similar themes. So yeah, that type of, and also I've been trying to work with Robert Frost's poem Acquainted with the Night recently, because because I know that it'll work in certain rhythmic structures, and I've kind of placed it as forms of ad lib along with a chorus that I made up myself. But yeah, I'll send it to you soon.
I can't wait. That's fascinating. And actually, when I think of Frost, of course, he's a great rhythmic poet. And I don't think of him belonging to the kind of traditions you write from at all in some ways, but I can see great rhythmic affinities actually, and focuses on dialogue and introspection after dialogue or through dialogue. Yeah, brilliant. Over to you, Zach, to pick whatever you want to be the last question.
Okay, yes, I've got a couple of questions, but I'm going to try and make this sound as cohesive as possible, and this is for William. What makes you decide if something is worth writing about or turning into a screenplay? And if you do suffer from writer's block, how do you cope with it?
Okay, Zach, thank you. Yeah, really good, really good question. I think in terms of, trying to decide whether something's worth, whether you want to lock horns with something, because it is, it's going to be hard emotionally and physically, and again, boxers talk about going to the mountain, and it's kind of like that. So you're going to go, okay, I'm going to have to go to the mountain for this, and I'm not prepared to do it if at the end of it there isn't going to be something worth saying. And it sounds a bit sometimes sounds a bit pretentious to say that, but for me it's interesting because I've been off. I did a thing interesting enough about Richard Burton and Liz Taylor a couple of years ago, and with and it had Dominic West in it and Helena Bonham Carter, and it's one of the things I'm most proud of. And I turned that down about 4 times, and because the BBC had commissioned a chapter of a book, all they could afford was 1 chapter of the book, and they'd got the rights on that, and it was about the fact that they went on tour together, Burton and Taylor, later in their lives, and it was a road crash basically. He was trying to stay clean and get off alcohol. He was off alcohol, and she was addicted to painkillers that were given to her by a guy known as Dr. Feelgood, who was a Hollywood doctor. And I kept looking at it and I thought, I don't want to go there. I don't want to go to that dark place because there's nothing, it doesn't speak to me. There's nothing I can say. I can't add anything. All I can do is tell a story. I can tell that story. And ultimately, and this is quite a selfish thing, I thought, I can't tell anything of myself. And it's interesting, Paul, talking about that inner voice, because I think as much as you write lots of different characters, I also think you just write yourself lots of different ways. And I think that, but what happened with that was I read a piece that just said that at the time of his death, Burton was was in negotiation to play King Lear, and I was obsessed with. I've always been obsessed with Lear because I've said this to other people. I'm not letting the cat out of the bag, but I've had some alcohol issues over the years, and I haven't drunk now for 20 years. But King Lear's a play all about addiction, so that's why I'm interested in it. And I suddenly thought, Christ, why is this man who was this famous Hellraiser and an actor, and so, why is he wanting to play Lear? Well, it's obvious because Lear's a play about addiction. And then I suddenly thought, is that why he took the job on? And I wanted to call it originally Love is the Drug, because I suddenly thought, is love something you can get addicted to, just the same as a Class A substance? And suddenly I rang him up straight away. I said, yeah, I'm in, I want to do it. Because I'd found that thing about writing what you know about, but also writing that thing that you want to say something about. And so that's my criteria is whether it speaks to me, but also whether I can speak to it. And in terms of writer's block, I mean, it's interesting, writer's block, because I've never had it. And I remember somebody saying to me, except I didn't realize what it was. So he said to me, you're not scared of the white page, are you? And I thought, this is a producer once. So I thought, well, of course I'm not. It's what we all start with. You start with a white page and you write on it and bingo, you're in business. And he said, but you don't worry about that. And Rory gave me this fantastic quote, Ian Forster quote, which actually has become a bit of a saviour for me and got me out of a few sticky spots in meetings. He said, how do I know what I feel until I see what I say? Am I right, Rory? More or less that. Or how do I know what I think until I see what I say? And the point being, you write to find out. I write to find out. And what I've realised, so for me, there's never any writer's block, because it's like going to the loo. You have to do it, you know, or you explode. So I said, but my problem, my writer's block comes when I spend, and I've had this a couple of times when I've gone a bit mad. So I would spend 4 hours trying to decide whether it was a colon or a semicolon in a speech. And I mean 4 hours. I did that once, and had to be helped away from the computer by my wife. Because I just kept going, I can't fucking decide. I can't. Kept thinking, I can't decide. What is it? She goes, come have a cup of tea. And as I was leaving the room, I was going, yeah, but no, it's colon. And she had to sort of drag me off. And that for me is not being able to finish something. And any writer will tell you the hardest thing is finishing something. That's when the plane's a foot above the runway and you've got to land it. You can travel along the runway for 1.5 miles, a foot above it. You've got to put it down eventually, and that's where. So what I try and do now is I use a quote again. Sorry, forgive this. I have lots of quotes that help me. I'm going to show you. These are the two I've currently for your. I don't know whether people can see those. They're very quite profound, both of them. But they're my current two, and they help me a lot just not to get too carried away. But the one that I did here was Patrick Stewart, the actor, and he said every time he goes on stage now, and you're going to have to forgive me here because I'm going to use an expletive, but I'm quoting somebody. He said every time he's about to do a take or he's about to go on stage, he centers himself and he goes, I don't give a fuck. And then he does the take and then he walks on stage every time. I don't give a fuck. And he said it's because in the past he's given too much of a fuck. And I think that's true of all of us as creative people, that sometimes we give too much of a fuck and it stops you finishing and it stops you putting the plane down on the runway. And so what I try and do now, if I get to that stage, which is what I call writer's block, I go and I just let it, and I just leave it, and I walk away, and I sob. That's it.
And on Billy's sobbing, I think that's where we should draw the event to a close. Billy, you're an inspiration. That was brilliant. Paul, so are you. Teya, Lesley, Jade, so are you. Thank you so much for taking part tonight. I'm sure everyone enjoyed the event. Thank you also to Zach, absolutely, for chairing the event and also for organising it, for contacting people, setting it up. It was essentially his idea, and he's a brilliant host and got a very bright future. I've put some links in the chat, or at least some words in the chat, which you can copy and paste in if they don't work as links, to the Nottingham Creative Writing Hub Twitter, and also to the website. And on the website, you'll see links to our forthcoming events. You can also contact any of the staff and that sort of thing. Our next event, as you'll see there, is tomorrow, believe it or not. It's in collaboration with NTU's Crossed Lines project. It's Calling Across Borders, a short animation celebrating the voices of young refugees living in the UK. And it's a collaboration between the AHRC funded Cross Lines project and Compass Collective. Sarah Jackson is chairing that, and a colleague of mine, an esteemed colleague and friend of mine. And she's also chairing our next event after that on the 3rd of March, which is Linda Clarke, who is a graduate of the MA and PhD, who now works in Dundee, who's a superb and very unusual writer of fiction. And that's on the 3rd of March. She's supported by Victoria Zoe Callis, who is a PhD student, Midlands4Cities-funded PhD student at NTU, and 2 undergraduates on the BA Creative Writing, led by Andrew Taylor at NTU, and that's Mia Woodward and Josh Short, and they're brilliant as well. So you can go up and you can register for those or our other forthcoming events. There are 2 more after that. Thank you so much to all of you for coming and joining us. And thank you once again to Billy, Paul, Teya, Lesley and Jade. Thank you and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Oh, and
Thanks.
also to Zach, I'm sorry, of course.